Welcome to Revolutionary You. We are here to bring you wisdom and advice for enhancing your life, your mind, your health, and wellness. Hey everyone, this is Jason Leonards. This is episode number 278 of Revolutionary You, proudly brought to you by Revolution Fitness and Therapy. You know, you gotta love a guest who, as you are really trying to schedule the episode, they say, hey listen, this might get colorful. I'm not sure if that's okay with your show, and you know, not every episode of mine gets colorful, but sometimes they do. So I'll get the disclaimer up here that depending on who you're listening to this episode around, it might get colorful. I do want to introduce my guest. This is his first time on the show, so big shout out to Jason Blaha for joining me today. And to sort of set something of a foundation, because I think this is going to go a lot of different directions. One of the things that I had reached out to Jason about specifically for this was just, learning how to navigate online training, learning how to give cues, learning how to get people stronger. In 2020, a lot of personal trainers were forced to move into online training, whether they had experience doing it or no experience doing it. I'm someone that I've been very vocal about the fact that while I do enjoy online training, because from a geographic standpoint, sometimes from a financial standpoint, it is what works best for the client. But I feel like I do my best work face-to-face, and not every trainer will agree with me on that. But Jason is someone who I actually originally connected with because we do share one thing in common, aside from the fact that we have very shiny heads, is the fact that we both come into this field with a history of trauma. So both of us come through life surviving sexual abuse, and we both used that as a way to sort of turn our own lives around, because you can look at the adversity that happens in your life and suffer from it, or you can find a way to move beyond it and above it, and sometimes a little bit of both, depending on where you are in life. But Jason, I don't want to steal any of your thunder, since this is your first time on the show. If you will tell my listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you got to be where you are today.
Oh man, well that's a great introduction, and I do agree with you, and I love the fact that you've been able to turn that trauma into strength, because for me that's a big part of what I do. I mean, for me, that's the motivation to get under a 500-pound barbell, is the fact that I felt weak and helpless as a child. And, to turn that into something positive and to use that to drive to better ourselves is really valuable, because you've seen the statistics. I mean, look at what happens to many abuse survivors. They end up in prison. They end up alcoholics, drug addicts, everything else.
Yeah.
They oftentimes end up the dregs of society, or you can choose to channel that into something positive. And for me, I've chosen to channel it into strength, and I haven't always channeled it positively. But a little bit about me, I don't really always like to get into too much about me, because as I told you before, I lead a very compartmentalized life because I am a YouTube celebrity, and I hate to use that term. That alone gets trolled. But I have to compartmentalize my life. I have to keep a lot of aspects of what I do private, and basically nothing about me really goes online other than my training these days, and my training philosophy, and a lot of my clients I even keep largely masked. You're one of the people who gets to see them because you're on my friends list.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of their videos, and a few of them I choose not to post their stuff, but the public at large only sees a couple of my clients. But I'm blessed in the sense that I don't have to market my coaching a great deal, because I have a very, very large YouTube and Facebook audience and everything. But for me, what defines me is strength. Like I live a strength lifestyle. I'm passionate about strength. I'm passionate about getting people under a barbell and getting them strong. And I live and breathe strength 7 days a week. It is what I do every day, and it's my passion. So that really describes me more than anything else. And that's kind of my life mission, is to get everyone who I can to get under a barbell. I think literally every human being on earth who is physically capable should get under a barbell. I think it's in their best interest, physically, emotionally, and everything else. And that's something that I see that you do. And I like that a lot, because I'm really big on maxing out and having my clients max. And I see you have people from a different demographic that I normally coach. I'm watching you basically have housewives and grandmothers doing 1-rep max lifts with barbells. And
Yes.
I love that. I love that. That's one of the favorite things that you do that I love. So I guess we could go a lot of different directions with this, though. So where do we want to go first?
Yeah, no. So first off, thank you for the compliment because it was something that I try to say this as often as I can because after you've had the show as long as I have and you start to connect with more people in the industry and things like that, I'm fantastic at being on Facebook and I'm fantastic at scrolling through Facebook. I'm not always the best at engaging, but you're someone that since we've been connected, you show a lot of love to my clients, and even somewhat recently there was a client of mine who was doing his personal best on a trap lift at the time, and there were some things that were happening with the form that I couldn't quite, solve. And so you were kind enough to take a look at the video and give me some insight into that particular client. And this is I think one of the fantastic things about social media is that when you start to forge these somewhat unique relationships, I do like to use people that I think are smarter than me and better than me to look over my blogs or to look at certain videos and to go, okay, I'm seeing something. This is how I would fix it or address it. What are your thoughts? Because what I saw very quickly was not only with your own lifts, but what you were doing with your lifters was pretty spectacular. And personalities can be what they are. Everybody's got their critics and their fans, but it's really hard to dispute with data when the data says I brought this person from point A to point B,
Right.
to C
Absolutely.
to D.
Absolutely.
And I just think that stuff it's fantastic. So number one, thank you for helping, to shine a little bit of love the Rev Fit way. But I guess that's the first place that I want to start is to sort of set a little bit of a foundation because the one thing that I found with online training, and again, you are a strength guy, so I don't want to speak for you and say that people don't come to you for diet advice. Maybe they do, but
They do. That's comical. That's its own thing we can laugh about later.
okay. So, but I would imagine that when people see what you are capable of lifting and what your clients lift, they go, well, that's the guy that's going to get me stronger. So then they follow that path. But
Yep.
with online training and certainly the way that it manifested itself in 2020, a lot of trainers were kind of throwing themselves into it, having no idea what to do, no idea how to basically build someone, build a base of strength for someone, and to teach them this is how I want you to have a baseline for a perceived 1 rep max. Because now you're teaching somebody that doesn't know how to do it on their own. They don't know how to step outside of themselves and go, that's where things slow down. That's where the elbow tends to flare out on that bench press, whatever the case is. So let's almost start this on ground level. Because I know there's going to be a lot of coaches that tune into this that are going to be like, I don't know how to make this transition. When you're working with a client who maybe wants to get strong but doesn't have the experience, and you need to get some numbers about, okay, this is where we need to put your bench, this is where we need to put your squat and your trap lift, deadlift for the time being, what does that conversation look like?
Oh, ooh, that's interesting. That's usually done in my preliminary interview with someone because for me, I always schedule a Skype with new clients who apply. And to kind of weed through the trolls and the nonsense and everything else, I actually charge them money to even put a deposit down to even get that going. And it's usually a small amount and it's a petty sum. It's like $25, but it actually stops all trolls and everything completely because the troll will never send you money. So that lets me weed people out. But I like to get them in front of the camera and I always start asking them about their lifts. I want them to send me any footage they have. And usually for a client, if they don't have a lot of footage, the first thing I do is I take the numbers that they claim they lift. And then I scale those down a bit and have them go lighter and have them do some 5 rep sets during my first week of coaching. Send me the footage where I can analyze it and we can get into form coaching immediately from day one. And I have seen some truly horrific stuff from new clients who claim, well, I can bench 155 for 5 reps. And it's like, okay, well, that's a good base. He's not a complete noob until you see that bench press and it looks like a JM press because he's got his wrist cocked all the way backwards and the bar is in his fingertips. And, he touches his upper chest with it and flops around and has no concept of tightness or bracing or where his feet should be or even how to hold a barbell. And then you see his 155 for 5 reps and it's truly horrible. And it's even scarier when you see that with a 300-pound bench.
Sure, sure, sure. That may not even make it to the chest, or that bounces off the chest, or whatever the case is. Right, right.
Or squats can be even worse, and and it's can be a little interesting because you get people like, I've read Starting Strength and I've looked at your form tutorial videos. So and then you see some of the stuff. It's like you haven't actually clearly looked at anything ever.
Right.
But I think that kind of raises the point of why it's important for people to video their lifts. We live in an age where there's no excuse not to video your lifts, where you can look at them yourself and see what you're doing. But video footage, because I'm not there in person to assess them the same way. I need video footage, and I can tell a lot from video. And really, you can do enormous things with video that you can't do in person, because in person, you're stuck with the moment and having to pay attention and try not to blink or anything while you watch everything this lifter does. Whereas with video, you can watch it over and over and over. I can
Right.
take their videos and determine if a lifter tells me that's their one rep max, and I'm like, really, why'd you do it in 1.9 seconds? Like, why are you sandbagging on me? That was a 1.9 second squat, telling me that is your one rep max. And
So let's break it down even further. So we've got let's talk about the three lifts. So we've got the bench, we've got the squat, and we've got a pull from the floor, whether it's deadlift
right,
or trap lift.
right, sure,
Where
sure.
where would you ideally like the camera to be set for these lifts?
I actually have them do a variety of angles,
Okay.
and it's almost funny because we've almost coined the term because of one of my clients who is Asperger's, and he's a very high functioning, very intelligent guy, but he started calling him, I'm sorry for my autistic camera angles.
Oh my
Because he
gosh.
would give me the most bizarre, and it's stuck with some of my clients, and we call it that now, but he totally started that trend. And he apologized for it, and I'm like, no, you're awesome. These are, because it was hilarious, some of the angles I would get, because he was trying to do this at a public gym, and we would get these lopsided, for me to look through. So realistically, I like as many angles as possible. Deadlifting, obviously, the side helps, the front helps. But a lot of times I'm used to even a 45 degree to where I can see a bit of both, so that I can see their hip position, I can see their lumbar, I can see where their upper back, their lower back, and things are on any sort of pull. Because my clients do a lot of hip hinging. We don't just do one type of deadlift. I have almost all my clients do sumo deadlift, conventional deadlift. We all of my clients do good mornings. A lot of them we do block pulls, deficit deadlifts, deadlifts with chains, deadlifts with trap bars, whatever equipment they have. So I actually have my people max on a lot of different movements. But I like to get as many angles as possible, and I'm used to starting from whatever angle they can do. It doesn't matter. I'm used to seeing so many angles and how it carries over with movement that I can actually work with most of my people from 1 to 2 angles tops on most of these lifts, and just make it work. Because a lot of times people are filming in crowded gyms, and as a coach, you have to know enough about movement and the body to just work with the angles that you have. And if you need something different, I actually tell my people to just get me a different angle. Can I see this more, from your feet looking over, so I can see exactly where you're gripping the bar and what your elbows are doing there, and can I get a side shot on your bench, so that I can see if you're stacking your elbows correctly from that direction and where we're touching. And so I like to do it from different angles, but really I'm used to working from sometimes whatever my clients can get depending on their gym environment. Now, obviously, post COVID, um, many of my people have home gyms. I have, I think, 16 clients who have home gyms right now. And that occurred a lot more with the lockdowns. A lot of my clients had to build home gyms very quickly, or they already had them, or I had to transfer over to clients who had home gyms. I had a bunch of people apply who had them as soon as they realized lockdowns were happening. They're like, oh, I bet you've got client slots open now. So I had like 8 people apply in 1 week who had home gyms.
Sure.
And so that's a little better with the home gym. But if they're in a crowded public gym, you work with what you have, and you learn to just make it work, and to take that footage and slow it down, and look at everything and pause it and say, well, if I was looking at it from this other angle, where would their elbow be? You've got to know a little bit about biomechanics to to do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, the other thing too, and we were talking about this a little bit offline, but one of the certifications that I picked up for myself was the online trainer certification. I've met John Goodman, thought he was a super nice guy. I know some people think that he's maybe a little bit too aggressive with the marketing, but that's what he does. You know what I mean? It's like saying Gary Vaynerchuk is a little too social media involved. I mean, that's what he does. And it's fine. And I know that it speaks to a certain person. Now, the reason why I personally went through the certification was because there were some consistency things that I felt were lacking in the way that I was working with my online clients. And it's still not, probably as well oiled of a machine as what I would like, but it's a lot better. And so I did that certification because I was like, well, if nothing else, if it gives me some better systems to streamline, then I'm good with that. It'll be worth the money for me. But I'm not someone who markets online training. It's one of those things that's like when the option sort of falls in my lap, it's like, oh, by the way, I can help you with that. But I don't do a lot of the advertising myself. Talk to me a little bit about how you have actually advertised your services, because I did just a cursory look on YouTube before we, or as we were scheduling this episode, and I was like, wow, that's a pretty damn big following. But again, to your point, you post every single thing that you do in the gym, and that's going to attract a lot of attention because you're not moving around small weight, not by any stretch of the imagination. You're not doing it with spotters.
Right. And that's been my biggest marketing, I think, for me is obviously I used to do a lot more drama stuff and everything. It used to be an entertainer, and I toned that down in recent years more and more. And I've really turned everything I do into purely education. Like I just simply don't care about drama or gossip or what anyone else in the industry or community is doing at this point. I care about running my business, getting as strong as I possibly can, getting people as strong as I can, and getting my clients as strong as I can. And to me, everything else has kind of become just noise. So for me, that's all I do anymore with it. It's just about documenting my list, discussing training philosophy. But that helps. I mean, the fact that I upload everything that I do in the gym kind of speaks to what I'm doing. I'm probably the only person I know of who literally uploads every workout, the entire workout, every week for years on end. And so people can say, hey, how did you get from a 500 squat to a 550 squat? You can go watch that 6-month window of time and see it. So it's all there documented and dated. But in my case, I market because I put out a lot of information, and realistically, instead of people marketing the way that a lot of them market, because I see people market in ways that makes me cringe a little bit for their online coaching, is people can go listen to what I have to say. They can listen to determine, am I knowledgeable? Do I understand biomechanics? Do I understand, training periodization? Do I know how to program? Do I know how to apply it? And they can base it on that. And that actually has pulled in large numbers of my clients. I mean, I get some who come on just because they're enormous fans, and they may not even take their training as seriously as I would like. And I have a few of those. But usually it's the fact that if you're going to do online coaching, you probably need to have a base of your knowledge somewhere for people to see. You need to be making blogs or have a blog or articles you write or videos that you make. That's how people are going to determine if you're a good coach or not because you've put up an ad to where you're marketing. And like one of the things that I cringe on the most with that is when I see people who are even friends of people I like, who they'll do this big spiel on their social media about their coaching. And I'm like, really, I don't even see how much your coaching costs in there. What do you like? You're throwing a big sales pitch and not even saying, hey, this is what I charge. This is the service I offer. So I don't even like to do a sales pitch. I'm just right open. I'm just like, bam, my coaching's $250 a month. This is the services that I offer. I have 3 slots open.
Right.
And it's just pretty straightforward. And I kind of break down right there. There's no real sales pitch for me. It's this, I have slots open. This is what they cost. This is what I give. Apply if you're interested. I mean, and it's pretty straightforward. There's no real marketing, because the marketing for me is my own training. The marketing is the knowledge base and information that I put out. And again, people can either decide that I know what I'm talking about or I don't based upon that. And if they don't trust that I know what I'm talking about, well, I don't want them to apply for a coaching slot. Why would you hire a coach who you don't trust?
Exactly.
Who needs to sell you something?
Right. So the one thing that I like to bring up on here, especially for anyone that likes to mention it. So you had said, I believe you said this when we were offline, but just so that we have sort of frame of reference, you currently weigh what?
220.
And where are your lifts respectively right now?
Oh gosh, because I do so many variations.
Right, right.
Because I run conjugate style training. The heaviest lifts I've hit recently with a cambered bar, and about as raw as you could be because I train in just shorts and a belt. Like no shoes, no socks. I did 565 on a cambered bar squat the other day. I did 552 on a buffalo bar the other day. I closed grip 342 this week on a bench press.
Yeah.
That's after I injured my shoulder doing ring pull-ups and I had to rehab that. So I regressed. I'm back to there and trying to get it back to goal is 365 on a closed grip this year.
Okay.
Best deadlift this year was 625 off of a 1-inch deficit.
Wow. And then
And I train raw, like you see the videos. People are like, oh, he trains almost naked. I'm like, yeah, I wear running shorts and a belt.
right, right. But
and I'm about to turn 44, so I'm doing this in my 40s.
Yes, and I wanted to bring that up too. So, so let's talk about the injuries just in general. I think I have about a year of age on you. I definitely do not lift the things that you lift, and I don't weigh what you weigh. So it's an apples and oranges conversation.
Sure.
But it's one of those things too that certainly as I've gotten older, when I do get one of those kind of strange tweaks in my lower back, which is typically the place where it happens anymore, it's one of those things that I could be not completely out of commission, but I definitely won't be doing much lifting for a good week or so. With your injury, certainly because of the trauma that you're putting those muscle fibers through, what does that recovery process look like for you?
Oh, recovery is what I live and breathe. So for me these days, my training is usually 4 days of actual real training every week, and then I do a lot of GPP on off days. But everything else is active recovery. So for me to even recover from the way that I train in my 40s, I sleep on average 9 hours a night. I use melatonin to get extra sleep. I probably spend 30 to 45 minutes every single day with a fairly expensive, several $100 massager digging into everything. Foam rolling, massage, hot baths, relaxation, living a completely stress-free lifestyle. So I try to actually cut all stress out of my life. I don't allow any person into my life who stresses me out in any way. That includes family members, friends. So I mean, I have to live a stress-free lifestyle to train the way that I train. I have to watch volume because even I, again, despite knowing what I know about programming, will push myself to overuse injuries because I'll train with more volume than I know that I should be doing at times. So again, it's learning to reel that volume in, learning to reel in training volume, because realistically, overused injuries are how we get hurt in the weight room. Right. The majority of injuries are overused. They're not necessarily bad form. It's you're just training with way too much volume for too long.
And so, it's interesting that you talk about this too, because, I have a client right now who, I won't say across all lifts he's the strongest person in the gym, but he's one of the strongest people that we have. And, the running joke that he and I have is that he used to be a soccer player and an endurance runner, and he looks like a power lifter. Like when you see him, you're like, oh, that guy lifts. And then you set the two of us side by side. I look like an endurance runner, and I don't want to run any more than I want to be chased with a chainsaw. So it's, for me, I've always just enjoyed the feeling of lifting more than I have any kind of cardiovascular activity.
Right.
And, he is a guy he's married, he's got 2 kids, he is a partner in a successful business. He is glued to a desk all damn day long. It's not a low stress job. So, you take family, you take kids, you take all that stuff. Plus, I want to go to the gym and lift heavy shit. And so when he does, tweak himself, which oddly enough, he tends to tweak his back, and it doesn't happen on a deadlift or a trap lift. It tends to happen on a squat. And just, that spinal compression is what seems to get him. And it's one of those things where it's like, I know how frustrating it is for him, but you said something that I think is really key, and not just for strength training, and that is a low stress lifestyle.
Absolutely.
Talk to me about that, because that's big shit right there.
I have to talk to a lot of clients about this because I mean, again, who can afford online coaching and has a home gym? Usually people with 6-figure incomes.
Sure.
Over half of my clients are well into 6-figure incomes. So a lot of them have stressful jobs. So we spend a lot of time talking about stress management and learning to step back and for them to separate their work from their downtime, and actually getting them to understand that, hey, when you're done with work, if we want to train and get strong, you have to set your work to the side. When you're done with work, you're done with work. You've got to have an off switch to where you turn it off for the day, and then you have your me time every day that goes beyond just the gym. You've got to learn to relax at night. Turn the phone off and quit exposing yourself to light. Don't check your work emails
Right.
as you're laying down to go to bed. And that's hard for some of them, because some of them are successful business owners, or they have very, very well paying corporate jobs. And I mean, when you make $300,000-$400,000 a year, and work is usually life.
Right.
And so getting them to learn to separate those things and to take the time to take hot baths or to do massages. And I have some of them who are like, I don't have time to take the hot bath. I'm like, well, do you have time to just buy a really high-end massager and dig it into your delts, because your delts have been bothering you, from bench and overhead press? Get in there and massage these things, and learn to separate the work life, and to learn to, when you are not at work, to have an emotional off switch for it, to where you can detach, and just, whether it's meditation, relaxing, a hot bath, listening to music, they have to be able to separate work from their relaxation time, because if they can't, you're never going to recover from heavy squatting and deadlifting.
Well, and let me ask you this too, and I know this may ebb and flow. 2020 may not be the best sample size to pick from, but right now with your
Right.
current clientele, what percentage of your clients are with you like they're getting stronger for aesthetic goals? Some of them are just because they just love to chase the numbers, and how many are
Oh,
with you because they compete?
oh, it's a pretty good breakdown. As far as aesthetics go, zero. And the reason is, I reject all applications if the word aesthetic appears in it. That's one of my, nope, I reject it, because I've learned that they're a problem for me, because I don't care about aesthetics at all. And they're, because again, some people are like, well, some people think I have a good physique. Some people think I have a horrifically hideous physique. And I hear a lot of both, but I actually don't care. And I don't care about those endeavors in any way. I'm like, that doesn't make you stronger. And it kind of comes down to my primary message is one of healthy masculinity. It comes back to some other things that we have in common. Like, I'm very big on promoting healthy masculinity, and I don't think men pursuing being beautiful is necessarily in their best interest for their own identity as a masculine man. Well, let the women be beautiful. You just be strong and fit and athletic, and be at a healthy athletic body fat. Let your woman be the beautiful one. So I actually have none of those. And as far as people who compete in things, I would say about current clients, about 2/3 just want to get really strong, or they want to get really strong and stay strong into their older age, because they see me doing it at my age, and they're 35 already, and they're feeling the aches and pains,
Mm.
and they want to, get there. I have guys who are like, well, I want to squat 500 pounds when I'm 40, and I don't want to hurt. And it's like, well, hey, that's a great goal. And then I have people who compete in powerlifting or other sports. I mean, I have actually a couple of guys who are high school athletes who do, baseball or football.
Yeah.
I have a couple of guys who do BJJ and things like that. And people would be surprised. Like, it's not mostly powerlifters. I only have 3 guys who compete in powerlifting, and 1 girl who competes in powerlifting
Yeah.
out of my current 23 clients. And that's not counting people I program for. I have people who I write programming for that I don't coach, and they're a separate thing. And they're all former clients who just don't need coaching anymore, and they just need me to write their monthly training block.
Sure, sure. So let's talk a little bit about cueing, because I know every coach is going to have their favorite cues, and certainly as we've already kind of talked about, there are certain things that apply more in face to face. There's some things that tend to get a little bit lost in translation, for better or worse,
Right.
with video. But since you're not doing things in real time, you're having to go back, you're having to watch these videos.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, what a client thinks they're doing, they're not actually doing. I'll use something
Oh,
as
absolutely not.
simple as a plank. If I tell a client, set your hips down, they think my hips are down. No, you are doing downward dog. This is not
Right,
the
right.
same movement. So it's one of those things where I am kind of curious, what cues do you find tend to be most helpful, respective of each lift?
Oh, well, this gets interesting, and this is where it gets colorful, because my cues tend to be where my real personality comes out, and my vulgarity. So usually, it makes a great impression with young men, and this is something I learned in my own previous career because I worked in the hydrogen and natural gas industry before I got into fitness. And I did a lot of field work and contract work out in the field. And so again, we're working with real working men. And so I've learned a different way of speaking, and this works very, very well with young men. It's like if my guys are squatting high, I'll be like, your squat was fucking higher than giraffe pussy. Like your squat just looked like it fucking came back from a Bob Marley concert. And so my guys are used to that. So it's like if one of my guys squats high, they'll send me in the video, sorry, my squat was higher than giraffe pussy. And they'll say it in the video because they already know. But this is the stuff that I do is it tends to be things along those lines. Like one of my favorite ones on the bench press, when I'm telling someone to get tight and I'm teaching them how to set up an arch and dig their feet in and everything, and they're still loose. It's like one of the ones that I say is no, when I say get tight, I want you to get so tight that your girlfriend can't pull a pencil out of your ass with a tractor. And again, this tends to go over really well with young guys. It abuses them and it's funny. And obviously, I don't talk to my female clients in this way.
No, probably not. Well, and it's interesting too because of something you said just a moment ago, and I typically will use it for squat and bench because I do tend to have guys that, we'll kind of go back to what you were saying before. A guy says, well, I can do 155 for 5 or 155 for 1, and I'll see that 155 and I'm like, my God, there was 4 inches of space above your chest. That's like
right.
Cheech and Chong high. And
right,
I'm the old guy at my gym. So my coach who shares time with me here, his name is Mike, and Mike is 25. So I'm basically old enough to be his dad. But it would have been a young dad, but still old enough to be his dad. And so he'll just look at me and he's like, yeah, that is an old man reference. Like you're gonna have to get a little bit more current with the times.
Absolutely. Well, and here's the thing with cues. Cues need to be individual to what the lifter is doing. And what I find is that you have to over exaggerate cues, and when you give guys mantras to have through their head when they're approaching a barbell, the cue needs to take them to the other extreme. Because they don't realize what they're doing wrong. They need to over exaggerate the movement that you need them to go to. So oftentimes we have to swing the pendulum, have them create a visual image of going all the way to the other extreme just so that they can meet in the middle. So for example, like with overhead pressing, a lot of my guys really struggle with the transition if we're going to do a heavy press. Because I have a lot of my people max on the overhead press. Those are my big 4. For you, it seems to be squat, bench, deadlift, and the trap bar. And for me, it's squat, bench, deadlift, and overhead press. But a lot of them struggle with the transition point to where they need to shift the weight behind their head, or they tend to drop the bar too low on their chest and they don't get good leverages and they end up with too much rotation of the shoulder. And so a lot of times it's like I always tell them, you need to learn to pull it in tight, lay back. And I always say to pull it in tight, meaning I want the bar tighter and up on their collarbone instead of hitting their pecs on an overhead press. And I told them, and when you're driving it up, I want you to throw it behind your head.
Sure.
And that's how you get an overhead press in a straight line, because you do have to have a point to where you have to get your face back so that you don't hit yourself in the face, especially if you're going to touch the collarbone. And then as they drive it up, they have to get the bar up over their head. They have to get it behind their head. But a lot of times that transition is where guys really mess up, and then they lose all their power right there at the head. So I want them to focus on throwing it behind their head, which they're not going to do unless they have amazing shoulder mobility. But something like that can help them through it. And as far as different cues on bench press, again, really basic stuff. It's mainly about getting their setup good. If you can get them set in tight and you can get their 3 points of contact good, and you can get them to create a proper arch and pull their scapula down and back, really it's just a matter of controlling the weight from there. So I tend to use cues like teaching them to try to break the bar, pull the bar apart. Tend to focus on them bringing their chest up towards the bar as it's coming down, so that again they stay tighter and they have nice full air in their lungs when they touch. And then I usually have them, as they're pressing it up, to concentrate on pushing themselves into the bench, so driving the bar away from them. Instead of them pushing the bar, they need to be pushing themselves away from the bar.
Right. Somewhat selfishly, and I have no problem, falling on my own sword with this, but some of the things that we tend to see with a fair amount of frequency with some of our heavier lifters. I'll start with squat first, but we do see it happen too on deadlift, trap lift. Do you have some good go-tos for knee valgus?
Oh, well, they just need stronger glutes.
Stronger glutes. Okay.
Yeah, they need stronger glutes. But I resolve a lot of squat issues by training everyone on the box squat. All of my lifters box squat.
Yep.
And I usually only let them back squat when we're going to test a 1 rep max.
Okay.
So in general, none of my lifters perform reps at all with a back squat.
Okay.
We only take it to a 1 rep max, and we only do it when we can PR. So it's like if I have a lifter who had a 405 back squat when I started with him, I might not let him back squat again until he can squat 450.
Okay.
And so we focus on the box squat, and by me teaching them the box squat, I can actually have a little more standardized of a lift, to where we can learn to use the box to learn all the cues that we need. Because if you can sit back correctly on a box squat, and you can learn to box squat with your knees vertical, and you can control the eccentric rep and then come up with no rocking, you can never have performed a back squat in your entire life, and you'll come in and squat more on a back squat the first time you try it than you did on the box.
Sure.
So it's not necessary for me to actually train the squat for lifters if I teach them the box squat. It transitions over perfectly. And, and I'll have people argue and say, oh, that's not true, it doesn't work. I'm like, really? I've taken 6 guys from a 400 squat to a 500 squat doing that. I mean, it works very well.
Right. Well, and that's, one of the things that you and I were talking about is it's hard to debate the data. I mean, you may have a different way of getting to the end goal. You take
Sure,
5
sure.
coaches, put them in the room that say, I took somebody from 400 to 500. They're going to have
They all
differences.
have a completely different
Totally.
method, and they all work.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of it. That's the problem, is that when people in this industry say that only this works, and it's like, well, no, there's 4 other things that work just as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of what's your preference as a coach, or what fits the needs of your lifters. A lot of things that work. We could argue that some things might work a little more efficiently than others.
Yep. So we talked about knee valgus. The other thing that I've been seeing, and this is on my, I see this happen on my deadlifters. I don't really see it happen with trap bar, and that could just be because of, weight distribution. But the one thing that I tend to see is lifters who have no problem getting the weight off the platform. In terms of that first lift off is fast. It looks like it's going to be a set lift, and then they start to get that little bobble and that shake, and they can't lock the bar out once it gets to either just below or just above the knees. What do you find tends to work best for that?
Well, it's going to depend on their back position for that. So I assume we're talking about conventional deadlift, not sumo.
Correct.
Sumo is its own beast.
Yes. Yeah. and that's accurate. Traditional. Correct. Correct.
Yeah. Because I coach all my lifters on both. Usually it's going to depend. Are these people what's their back position look like when they start?
It's a great question. So I obviously I try to get that shoulder position right about at midfoot before they start the lift off. But I still have clients that maybe they start that way, but once they initiate the pull, they tend to drift forward. So then they have to self-correct and pull the bar back, and that's where you start to see just that total loss of tension and energy, just trying to get the bar to straighten out again.
That's usually weak lats most of the time. It might not be, but more often than not, those people need to be doing more rows, more weighted pull-ups. Mm-hmm. They need to get stronger lats if they're having that bar drift that way.
Yeah.
But as far as the lockout, and if you'll notice for me, I address everything with fixing muscle imbalances rather than cues, because I deal with a lot of advanced lifters, and once a lifter's form is ingrained, it's ingrained. And the only way you're going to fix bad form is by strengthening muscles and creating a different compensation. Because again, a lot of bad form is about compensatory strength more than anything else. Is they have a muscle weakness somewhere that's causing the form to break down. So in the case of something like that with the deadlift, depending upon what their back position looks like at the start, it could be weak glutes, or it could be a weak T-spine, it could be weak upper back, depending upon how they start. So if you have a lifter who they start to shake there and they run into problems with locking out because they still have a rounded back that they can't lock, and they start with a rounded spine, because again, someone we both know, she pulls with a round spine, and she's quite successful in that Sumi.
Yes. Yep.
But she's quite successful at it as a power lifter doing so, but she has the back strength to lock the weight at the top when she does that.
Right.
Because she's actually has to do with her own structure and the fact that she has a very strong back, and she's not blessed with the best leg genetics, but she's got a really jacked back.
Right.
And she uses that to her advantage when she pulls. And I mean, my God, she's pulling like what, 350 or something, while weighing 110 pounds. I mean, that's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yep.
Um, and she's pulling in that manner. But she's using her back to do that. What happens if you have a lifter who has too much thoracic rounding and they don't have the T-spine strength to lock that? Then it could be an upper back weakness for them. If you have someone who has a correct back position and they don't use any form of thoracic rounding, and they have thoracic extension and they're struggling above the knee, it's probably weak glutes.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
And so then we would address that with supplemental work. And it's funny, some of the things you mentioned for your lifters with the knee valgus and the squats, I don't get that in my lifters, because I make my lifters live on good mornings.
Oh.
So we like, they, to the point where some of them hate me.
Yeah.
Because it's like, usually with my people, and again, I lead by example. I mean, I do good mornings with well over 500 pounds with more than one bar. And I mean the same thing. I do like something like sets of 20 reps with 275.
Good Lord.
I don't care. I mean, do like multiple sets of 20. But I'm not in a high rep phase right now. Everything's heavy. But so we correct those problems with a lot of the lifts that we just work with from day one.
Yeah.
So box squats and good mornings are staples for all of my lifters.
Yeah.
And pen leg rows are staples for all of my lifters.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Again, we were talking about the lat issue. I'm like, well, I don't run into that as often with my guys, because any of them that exhibit any sort of upper back or lat weakness, I put them on as much pen leg rows as they can recover from every week. Like all the way to the point where I would take them to their maximum recoverable volume on rows, like as many as 15 to 20 sets.
Sure.
Which is rather ludicrous. And I wouldn't advocate most lifters ever do 20 sets of most exercises in a week, or even 20 sets for a body part. We're getting pretty extreme at that point. This is where injuries happen,
right? Because
of overuse. And guys are like, well, I want to do 30 sets per body part because Dr. Mike Israetel said that I might get 0.5% more muscle growth. Like, well, until you snap something. And that 0.5% could be questionable as far as being really supported by the data. But that's neither here nor there. So I will push them really hard on things like that early on if I see those weaknesses. If I have a lifter who I see a problem with weak erectors or weak glutes and things, we're going to good morning into the ground. Like I'm gonna push those with as much as they can handle in terms of recovery, to the point where I'll pull other exercises out.
Yeah. So
that I can address those things very, very early on. So those are lifts that some of my lifters hate and they'll complain about, the sheer amount of rowing that I make them do, or the amount of good mornings. But this is how I take guys who have been stuck at a 315 deadlift for a year up to a 450 deadlift in 6 months.
Right.
We fix these problems because I get that. And to me, that's always shocking because of the strength standards I put out there. Like, wait, you've been training 3 years and you have a 315 deadlift? Like, how's this even possible? What, you ran 531 and didn't get past it. You stayed at 315 the entire time. Like, but I get these clients and they've been at a 315 stuck for a year trying to budget. And then we take them to 450 and they're usually, that's a client for life. You're not losing them.
Right. That's right.
Like, that client's going to pay you for the next year. But it comes over to fixing everything by addressing weaknesses.
No,
that's how I solve most of the problems with my lifters. If their form is decent, we don't need to spend a lot of time correcting form. We just need to get stronger.
And that's actually, with the video that I sent you of my lifter, that was actually, what you had said for him, for the issues that I saw with that particular lift in the video I sent you. You're exactly right. You said, well, it looks to me like he needs to be doing this type of accessory work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's how we fix everything. And I'm big on accessory work. I mean, I love big barbell lifts and I live and breathe big barbell lifts, but there's a place for even single joint exercises for a strength athlete.
Yeah. Yeah, it's.
I don't do a whole lot of them, but they do have their place.
Well, Jason, this has been awesome. I knew that due to the subject matter, this was going to be kind of a dense episode because there was going to be a lot of stuff to cover. And
Right.
I definitely want to be able to try to open up the door for, another conversation with you in the future. But I feel like this is
Oh,
one of those
absolutely.
that people need to probably listen to more than once to catch the gist of what you're saying because, and this is going out to all the newly minted online trainers in 2020 who are trying to figure out how to make it all work and see, do it with any degree of success, as they're going to have to adopt some of the wisdom that you've shared on this episode for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And it was fun being on here. We'll definitely do it again some other time.
For sure. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to make sure you leave listeners with?
No, I think that's good because most of what I have to say out there is available online. I have over 5,000 videos, so they can hear me talk for hours and hours and hours if they're so inclined.
Well, this was great. Thank you so much for taking the time and for your support of what we're doing here. I would love for more people to connect with you. So where are the best places for them to do so?
I'm actually pretty easy to find. My YouTube channel is Jason Blaha Strength and Fitness. It's got a big check mark, 80 million views. I mean, it's very easy to find, and links to anything else I have can be found from there. So as far as my main Facebook fan page and stuff, it's all linked from that channel.
Awesome. Well, I will put that information in the show notes. Thank you again. This was great, and I look forward to round 2 in the future.
All right, fantastic.
For those of you listening, hope you have an opportunity to download, subscribe, share with your friends. If you have an extra moment, please leave us an Apple Podcast review. We will catch you next time.